So a quick breakdown on the deadlift. If you're new to it, it is a power movement, which just means it is specific to powerlifting. Powerlifting is mainly comprised of 3 lifts: squat, bench, and deadlift. Those are the ones you're going to do in competition. But beyond powerlifting for competition, it's great for clients and it's great for building people's strength, and really helps as far as a preventative injury measure. I'll get it down eventually. Or otherwise known as prehab. That's what I like to call it. So it's like rehab, but before you have to do the rehabilitation, it's prehab. So powerlifting is going to be comprised of those movements. A lot of times when you're in a powerlifting program, you're going to be doing working up to sets. You'll warm up and then you'll work up to your sets. You're only going between 1 and 3 reps because you're looking for that max strength pull. You're trying to increase that learned strength, which will keep you usually to set weight category. Now, of course, there's other things that will be included in that, but usually when you start moving into bodybuilding style motions and progressions, you're moving to a higher repetition set. And then your rest period will usually decrease, and in powerlifting it increases. Because in powerlifting, you're looking to pull from that phosphate pool. So your ATP, your creatine phosphate, your phosphate. And that takes a while to regenerate because you're doing those things without oxygen. It's an anaerobic exercise. So when you're doing them, you have to take more time in between because you're trying to get upwards of 70, 80, 90% of your 1 rep max as you're going. So it's a little bit different. I like to incorporate both when I'm working with my clients. I'll hit a compound movement where we'll hit like 5 sets of 5 is a great starting number, or 5 sets of 3 if they have their technique down. And you'll then take that and then you'll drop set. So you'll hit something between like say 8 and 10 reps. So you're going to get a happy medium in between, which is why most people start you off at 5 sets of 5 if you're new to this. The reason being is you're still getting strength and you're getting hypertrophy, so that muscle building. If you go to do a 1 rep max and you go to pull for 1, and I put a gun to your head, so you have to pull a 2nd rep, you're not going to be able to pull a 2nd rep. Now if we do the same thing at 8 reps and I tell you, okay, you have to pull a 9th rep or else you're going to get your head blown off, well then, sorry for the gore, you're going to most likely be able to pull that because it's an exponential curve when we're talking about strength. So when you're doing hypertrophy, you're looking for more the bottom end of that curve. When you're looking for strength, you're looking towards the top end of that curve. So that's going to dictate your rep range. And we're talking about powerlifting, it's usually between 1 and 3 or 1 and 5 reps. And then of course, like I said, if you're looking to increase muscle size, you'll then include bodybuilding aspects. So you'll do like a drop set where you'll hit, let's say, squats, but you'll hit between 8 and 12 reps with a smaller rest period in between, like 30 to 90 seconds. Whereas powerlifting, sometimes in between sets, you're taking between 3 and 5 minutes. And between maxing, it's 5 and 8 minutes. So depending on what kind of program you're on, those are going to vary. When I'm working with clients, what I found is for the best results, we hit a power movement style, or a powerlifting style where we'll hit between 1 and 5 reps, do 5 sets, and then you'll drop set and hit like another 8 sets. So you're getting both the strength and the hypertrophy, which I find brings really great results for my clients. So when we start talking about deadlifts, there's 2 main kinds of deadlifts, conventional and sumo. There are very important differences in those two, and what you're trying to accomplish is going to dictate that. A couple of things that I look for as well, because I start everyone off conventional, is someone's femur length. So if someone has really, really long femurs or they have really dominant legs, I like to switch to sumo almost immediately with that person once they have the movement down. The reason being is the longer your femur is, the harder it is to clear the bar. So if the bar is here, if this is a side profile, and this is the bar, and we're going to pull it up, right? And your femur, this is tib fib down here, goes to straighten this way, the bar path needs to be straight. Well, if our femur sticks super, super far over the bar, it's really hard to get a straight bar path and not avoid curving, which will lead to our hip shooting and becomes a very back-heavy motion. It can be very dangerous and lead to backgrounding. So you can do a couple things. Either if you're dead set on conventional, move yourself a little bit away from the bar, which can help fix that. Or you can switch to sumo and put toes out, which will then put your knees in a different position. Now, what I talked a little bit about earlier was the difference in muscle groups used. So when you're doing a conventional style deadlift, you're going to have a lot more lower back engagement, specifically the erector spinae, which are those two muscles that run down the length of the spine and really contract hard at the bottom. Those are the two that, or the one really, that we're looking at. Now on sumo, it's going to be more leg heavy, so you're going to use more of your glutes, hamstrings when you're coming off the ground. Again, your deadlift works pretty much everything, but there's subtleties to this, especially when you're talking about pulling large numbers or fitting something that works well with your client. So those are a couple of things to look for. When you're working with conventional, you're going to have more of an angle downwards before you go to pull. Whereas sumo, you're going to sit more straight upright and then pull up. Both, you're trying to get your chest up in order to lock out, especially if you're going for competition. But those are going to be distinct differences in your sumo and conventional. They're not going to pull the same. In addition to those two, they're going to have quicker periods. So if we're talking about strictly the ascent, not the descent coming down over the bar, but just the ascent when you're after you've already set up and you go to pull, sumo and conventional are going to be very different. Sumo is going to be hardest to pull off the ground, but once you get it off the ground, it will come up easier, especially after the lockout point, which is when the bar comes up above your knee. Now your conventional, on the other hand, is going to be easier off the ground and harder to lock out. So once you get it up to your knees, that's where it's going to be usually harder to force your hips forward and engage your glutes in order to get that motion down. The lockout specifically on both sumo and conventional is going to be very glute heavy, which is where a lot of people fail. And we'll talk about accessories and things like that you're going to want to use in order to build up those pounds on that deadlift, as well as creating that full body synergy. So kind of coming all the way back as to why it is that we want to use that deadlift. Well, you're going to create that full body synergy. People say, oh, I don't want to do that. I want functional training. What does functional training mean? Functional training means you want to be able to use your entire body to do anything you want. You want to be able to contract everything in unison to create strength in order to go do something. Well, what are you doing when you're using a compound movement like squat, bench, or deadlift? You're using your entire body in order to accomplish a movement, and you're practicing contracting everything at once. Well, when you do that, you end up increasing that ability to use that functional strength. So I think it's kind of silly when someone says, well, I don't do any of the power movements or the Olympic movements because I want to be functional. Well, how do you be functional? Again, you have that full body synergy, and there's really no better way, I think, than to do either a specific motion in what you're doing, whether it's sport specific, life specific, or to use a compound motion like your squat, bench, or deadlift in order to accomplish that. So 100% deadlift is a functional training